This is All India Radio Bangalore and Bhadravati. In connection with the World Theatre Day, we now bring you an interview with Dr. James.V.Hatch, a well-known American playwright who was in Bangalore recently to conduct a drama workshop. The interviewer is Sri Adya Rangacharya, well-known Kannada playwright who is also a fellow of the Central Sangeet Natak Academy.
Mr. Hatch, I'm really very glad to have this opportunity of talking to you about some aspects of American theater. And because many of the listeners would also be interested in this. Now, first I am curious to know to what extent this study of theater or theater arts is included in the education of American youngsters.
Well, perhaps it's included on two levels. The first being the secondary school or the high school.
I see.
It has perhaps been a tradition for the seniors in most high schools to perform a play upon their graduation day or just before. This means that they in no way were trained. It was something for the community, for the parents to come and see their children on the stage performing. And so then a second play developed for the juniors in their junior year at the end. Most high schools then traditionally have these two plays, whether they have any other drama or training or not. And these plays been directed by English teachers who may have had some training in theater or maybe not. Then the larger schools, particularly in the last 20 years, have developed drama teachers, or what we sometimes call speech and drama, where the teacher graduates from the university with a degree in speech and theater and will teach courses in the secondary school in speech and theater and also direct the plays. And of course the standard is much higher in these cases. In the university theater, since the First World War, right after the war, some of the schools in the Midwest, in the middle of America, developed a small theater within the curriculum of the university. And this has grown in the Midwest and the Far West, like California, so that it is possible now to take a degree, even a PhD,
in theater arts. And suppose a student takes a degree in theater arts. What are the prospects for him?
He will almost certainly become a teacher of theater arts in the secondary school,
yes.
Or he will find another occupation that is different from the theater.
Oh, I see.
And very few of them will go into commercial theater.
Now, I mean, do any of these students who are trained, etc., go subsequently to the professional stage? Would it qualify them?
This is an argument. It used to be that the professional stage was very suspicious of anyone coming from the university.
I see.
You know, the producers did not want these bright theoretical...
Same all over the world, of course.
But now, if you read a program, a professional theater in New York, where the actors take their credits, in the last 5 years, you will find that the actor will put, I studied at the University of California. But until 5 years ago, he would not dare put this down because he didn't want anyone to know.
I see.
But now, perhaps the producer also has been to the university, so it's respectable.
Now, when you teach it in colleges, is it as a special subject or a subject which is compulsory to all? For example, why I ask this question is, you call it speech and drama or some such thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the speech part concerns not only a man who is going to be an actor, but also
That's right.
another man also.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for his own speaking or for appreciating good dramatic speech.
Right.
So I would like to know if any subjects in the theatre arts are included as subjects for all the students.
I would say the only case of this would be sometimes the university offers a course in what they call a theater survey or theater appreciation. And a student must have so many hours of humanities, and he may then select theater appreciation to fulfill that requirement. In which case, he will study the theater in its general aspects. But many colleges require all of the students to take basic speech training to make public speeches and to get over their self-consciousness and so on. But the theater, of course, can't do that.
I mean, with degree of this kind, are there any examples of some youngster becoming a playwright of some merit, recognized merit, or becoming an actor on a professional stage?
Yes. What has perhaps been the pattern more than any other is that a number of the actors and playwrights have studied in the university. Quite often they did not continue. They dropped out. For instance, Tennessee Williams studied in the dramatic workshop at Iowa. Now, he was there, I think, something less than a year, and he left and went off to have other adventures. Now, how much effect this year had on him, there's no way of knowing. This is quite often true, that the artist, will have spent some time in the university. The ones who continue on into graduate school, I think probably it's more rare to find them in the professional theater. They become the teachers. They become concerned with the academic, and so that they disappear.
Do you think that this teaching in schools and colleges, etc., has in any way affected theater in general?
Yes, it has created an audience.
I see.
The audience used to be confined to the very large cities, and by the very fact that so many people now participate in the secondary school and or college, means that they expect a higher standard of theater. They have seen a Shakespeare in the school, therefore they're not frightened by perhaps going to see a company. Yes, it's created.
Now,
an
in our
audience.
country, we have got what do you call this, amateur theater, as opposed to the professional or commercial theater. Is there any counterpart of that in America?
When you say amateur theater, you mean like the Bangalore Little Theater Group?
Yes.
Or
I mean,
the-
people, you see, who for the whole day are engaged in their other activities,
Right.
which is their profession,
Right.
and then just meet because they are, the one thing common to them is their interest in theater, and then they produce plays.
Right.
Sometimes 3 or 4 in a year, or sometimes 1 a year, but whatever it is, and they continue over years. Is there any
Yes.
counterpart to that?
Right. It's called community theater.
Community theater. you
Right. And again, in a city of less than 20,000 people, you probably won't find one, or if you find it, you find that it will exist maybe 2 or 3 years and then it will die. But the larger towns of 50,000 or more quite often have community theaters that have been there for a number of years, exactly on the basis you're talking about. People who do it because they love it,
I see.
they want to act, so they form a group in which they can perform.
So the towns themselves have some community theater running
Yes,
about.
right. In fact, I'd say that community theater has increased in the United States. In fact, the spread of television in America, I think, has contributed more to the growth of the theater.
It's a
than,
community theater.
Right, because people now have more interest in dramatics just because they see more, even on the television, which is usually, not too good dramatically.
Then, of course, as an Indian, my interest would be to find out if there is, any such thing as folk theater or folk music, and if there is any, in what relation does it stand to the other professional or urban theater?
We have some tradition of folk music, As you know, the United States altogether is hardly 300 years
Yes,
since
that's,
settlement. So we have no deep roots as you do and no strong traditions. But in the early days of the country, particularly the early part of 19th century, the farm communities in the various parts of the United States were quite different because of different climate and agriculture, and isolated, they don't communication. It's a very large country, physically, geographically. So that different kinds of music did develop in the South and in the West. And this music is now, well, within the last 40 years, the Library of Congress has begun to collect it and to save it. Up to this time, nobody thought it was of any importance, the people's music. It was not to be. But now it's been collected, and much of this music is American composers have taken it and abstracted from it, to make it into classical form or symphony form or this kind of thing. And it's also found now in the theaters. A play like Oklahoma, which was a musical in America some years ago, much of that music, its origins could be found, you see, in folk music as developed. Folk theater is not as common. No.
Yes, of course, that I can understand because, as you said, about these 300 years
Right.
background.
Most of our theater's been borrowed from Europe in its tradition, right? There are Native American Indians, of course, who have their own ritual dances, and these now have also been preserved, where they're dance dramas, perhaps to bring the rain or to celebrate harvest and so on. This would be an indigenous theater.
Now, of course, there are all sorts of dramatists in every country and in every language. But I would like to know whether some of these dramatists you mentioned, like Tennessee Williams or Arthur Miller, are dramatists whose plays would have long, long runs, which means whose plays would have millions and millions of audience. Mm-hmm. Does that happen? Or are they meant only for a few?
Well, the producers...
Have they any plays on the professional stage?
Right. There will be plays in an average year in New York in the professional stage, which will run maybe 700 performances. Some plays will even continue, very popular musicals, say, for 3 years. Oh. But we'll say Arthur Miller or Tennessee Williams, not musical, but just straight dramatic. These do not last as long. And if a play runs a season, that is, if it opens in October and it plays through May, it's considered quite successful.
Oh, I see.
Because the audience still, for straight dramatic plays, is not what it is for a musical. It's like people enjoy the cinema here. They like the song and they like the dance, and perhaps the intellectual community supports the other.
I mean, who would be, from your point of view, the most popular or the most talked of dramatist in America?
Well, today, Edward Albee is still Virginia Woolf.
Yes.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf,
Yes.
right? Because of that play and the motion picture it was made from it, and he has achieved considerable fame in America. He has a new play now running called Everything in the Garden, and I saw it just before I left, and it is, in many ways, a very conventional play, and a play that might even have been written, except for its subject matter, by Pinero or Jones of the English theater. And I don't quite understand this, because he seems to have gone back to the earlier forms. But he's still, for the people who like to, as we say, be in, the one that's talked about.
But a play like Who is Afraid of Virginia Woolf, could you say that the average American audience would understand the greatness or otherwise of the play?
I suspect the play speaks most...
No, the point is the other one. I will make it clear also. Whether the popularity of a play is made by its intrinsic qualities or by publicity or acting or some such thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly the popularity of this was increased by the use of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton.
Oh,
There's
I
no
see.
question
Oh,
of that.
I see.
Hollywood still puts the stars in the roles. But the play had achieved, a commercial success in the theater before the film. And yes, it was speaking, the play is about men and women, marriage in America,
Yes.
particularly of this upper middle class,
Yes.
the intellectual community. And it's giving a very truthful portrait of a kind of
Yes,
terrible
yes,
conflict.
yes, of course it is there, you see.
So I think that's why it's survived.
I mean, for an appreciative man, it's a moving play, definitely.
I wondered, though, perhaps you can tell me, what a play like that would have to say to a culture like India.
In Indian audience, to an
Yes.
Indian audience,
Yes.
I think, you see, of course, the production may appeal, but the problem may not be intelligible. Because we are too far away from that stage. I mean, unless this question of moral, marriage, reaches that stage, I don't think it would be. And then you see, there are other things also. For example, the way the characters drink in Who is Afraid of Virginia Woolf. We can hardly understand that. We don't feel any need for it, and some of us may feel repelled also, average Indian audience. You see, the characters would lose the sympathy of the audience.
Right.
But as I said, of course, a play is the product of the country, of the people. After all. No, that reminds me, because of this Who is Afraid of Virginia Woolf, do you also have, as in Europe, the post-war Angry Young Men?
Yes.
Because this is almost nearer Angry Young Man, this Who is Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Right. It is a form of that.
Yes.
And I think it's taken another turn now among the younger people. They perform what they call happenings or theatrical events, which are very spontaneous, unrehearsed or only partially rehearsed, and they're sometimes even called non-theater or anti-theater, kind of an attempt to smash the old theatrical forms, the old play structures, the old conventions, and make the audience wake up and participate instead of just passively sitting watching. So in this sense, the young people really are trying to create something
What's
new.
the provocation for breaking up the old traditions? Is it the professional stage? For example, you see here, I think the old professional stage now seems so silly to modern young writers that they make fun of it, they want to destroy it.
They feel it's not telling the truth.
Yes.
That the old conventions are telling lies.
Yes.
And the young people in America, are somehow, I think, particularly in the schools, rebelling against the older ones. They have a saying,
The underlying artificiality is a provocation.
right.
I see.
Don't trust anyone over 30 years old, they say. Because if you're 30, then you already belong to the establishment. And,
No, anyway, I'm very glad, Mr. Hatch, that you could spare this time and give the information where I was asking you.
well, thank you
I
very
hope
much.
you will have a pleasant time in India, and I also hope you will have occasion to take back with you some impression and experience of the Indian stage also, both old and modern. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You have just heard an interview with Dr. James.V.Hatch, a well-known American playwright, interviewed by Sri Adi Rangacharya, Kannada playwright and a fellow of the Central Sangeet Natak Academy. This interview was recorded earlier during the visit of Dr. James Hatch to Bangalore recently. This broadcast came to you from All India Radio Bangalore and Bhadravati.